You are listening to Why Such a Fuss podcast, sponsored by CVG Solutions, with your host, Cristina Vanini-Goodchild, and guests.
So welcome to another episode of Why Such a Fuss. Today I am pleased to welcome back James Robson, a data protection officer and speaker. A very warm welcome, James.
Thank you very much, Cristina. Really great to be back.
Oh, thank you. So now you've had a really strong career in data protection. Would you like to give us a little bit of a brief on it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I started out sort of late 2016, 2017, being an early data protection consultant, just trying to work out how to implement GDPR, EU GDPR as it was then. And then over the years, I kind of got my data protection officer PIPs working in research for multiple research organizations. And then for the last 2 and a bit years, I've been data protection officer for the Labour Party. And I've just stepped out to externally with a company of my own that I've just set up that I'm going to hard launch the next couple of months at some point. I'm still building the back end stuff, but got some great clients that I'm working with. But yeah, that's a bit about me.
Oh, fantastic. But you touched on a really good point, in terms of, working in the research arena, because actually there are some changes that the DUAA, the Data Use and Access Act, that is bringing on, that is particular, or some of those changes are particularly relevant to the research area or the research industry. Do you want to tell us about them?
Yeah. Well, one of them's really important actually, because about 2-3 years ago when I was DPO in research, one of the contentious points was around consent and the fact that ethical consent that you need under something called the Helsinki Principle. If you're having human data subjects, humans in research as participants of that research, you need to get ethical consent. And that was not the same as GDPR consent. So you had a lot of misunderstanding between, well, there's consent. I'm like, it doesn't fit because you can't withdraw that consent further down the line. It makes it really messy and difficult. If a researcher's analysed that data and then somebody withdraws their consent, you don't meet the criteria of GDPR, UK or EU GDPR. But what DUAA did is just kind of fix that sort of loophole and just say ethical consent is comparative to GDPR consent. That is game changing. Makes it so much easier and so many less arguments around ethical consent not being GDPR consent, because now it is. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah.
But also, I think, if I understood it correctly, one of the things that is changing is the fact that, if you are participating in a research and you're giving your consent for your data to be used in the research, at that moment in time, the researcher cannot tell you what the outcome is. So you can only, do you know what I mean? So that consent, in the past was partially given, but actually now the consent is valid all the way through, because nobody's going to know what the end result is.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It used to be, the GDPR consent doesn't work, and so there is no consent all the way through. It's a different lawful basis. But you're right. The outcome of it now can potentially change, because that's the whole idea of research. You collect the data, you analyze it, and then, this is what happens. This is what we found out. This is discovery. Now, what I think you're talking about is a secondary use of that data for further research. So the outcome and the use of that data can change. What DUAA has done is said, if there's a disproportionate effort to reach back out and tell people there's going to be a new piece of research using the same data, you don't have to tell them. And you don't need to get consent for the secondary use of that data either. So you don't have to tell them. You don't need a consent for the secondary use for research to be conducted again using your data. That is absolutely game changing. It's incredible. Brilliant stuff. Yes. Used correctly and in the right way, and if it's understood by researchers, which I'm a huge advocate of that, it needs to be used by them. It will have benefits for society as a whole. It really will.
Yes. Okay. Wow. Yes. So, I mean, I don't work, in research in terms of, none of my clients are, are part of the industry. But, as I was reading and the changes that the DUAA was bringing, I thought, oh, that is actually a really, game changer, like you said, it does make a huge, and also, it's not just, when we think of research, we primarily think about medical, but it doesn't have to be medical. Do you know what I mean? It can be any kind of research.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, things like so one project which is live at the moment that I've been helping out with is an AI platform to be able to use a large language model to help stop people from becoming homeless or being
Okay.
evicted from their home. And so, how do you then go? Well, you're using this tool, and then do you become homeless? And did the tool help or not? And so there's kind of data sets from here and here to be matched together for those kind of things. But to be able to then reuse it on, okay, the tool did help. It was this person, and then are they popping up in other data sets in other places to conduct research on that? But what's key here is it's not decision making based on them. It's not about going, because your data is here, here, and here, we've done this research, we're going to make a choice on Cristina. We're not making choices on Cristina. It's more societal outcomes to go, oh, it informs what we think about how we use the data as a whole. Therefore, we think this policy should be adopted by the government or this company or XYZ, or we should do more of this AI tool in this way because we did all the things right and it helped people. And that's what I'm really passionate about. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Wow. And actually, talking about, you were talking about using data for, a purpose here and then the same data for a purpose there. So actually, that's another thing that the DUAA introduces, again, not just in the research arena, but, across the board, is that, this a secondary purpose or use for a secondary purpose, it is now permitted, or you will be permitted by the DUAA, although there has to be a compatibility with the original purpose. So that's quite important. So the two uses need to be compatible. And while we are on the subject of, IT, you mentioned AI. So that for some reason, it brought to my mind, the cookies, because there are changes to cookies, the cookie pop-up banner for the consent. And I've already heard website designers, going out there say you no longer need the cookie pop-up banner for the non necessary cookies. So this is, your performance, your analytical, and so on. And I said, well, hang on a minute, it's not as straightforward as that.
Not quite. Yeah.
So really, unless you are a what is called an ISS, so an Information Society Service Organization, then your cookie stays as it is. So you still need to have the consent or, the accept or reject. But if you are an ISS organization, then you don't need the consent for the analytical cookies, but you do need an opt-out pop-up. So again, it's not as easy as you think. So you still need to have a pop-up of some kind. And in this case, it would be an opt-out. So you've got to give your user the opt-out. So if you don't know what an ISIS organization is, think of Amazon Prime. Think of Netflix. Think of if you are buying, say, an e-learning training online. So it's all to do with, there is no human interaction, basically. It's all done online. You're purchasing the service, the product online, and there is no human interaction. So if you're thinking of the Amazon, the shop Amazon, that is not an ISS because, you're buying a product, but then it has to be packed, it has to be shipped, it comes to you. That is not an ISS, so it's not straightforward.
I think there's lots in there where actually lots of companies will not need to change anything. But the reason for DUAA coming into existence, the Data Use and Access Act of 25, is because the government have done an analysis that by the incremental changes, or it's not even changes, it's augmentation. It's adding on top of what we currently have. It will save the government the government £10 billion. £10 billion. That's why they introduced it. So yeah, really interesting stuff. And what other parts of DUAA have popped up for you of things that are in conversations, do you think?
So for me, because I work, or some of my clients are charities, so there is a change that the DUAA introduces for charity primarily, is that currently, under the PECR and the GDPR, charity are not allowed to use the soft opt-in for marketing, so all through consent, while instead private organization can do that. So with the DUAA, they can now use the soft opt-in, which kind of makes life easier, although you still need to have, obviously the lawful basis that will apply will be legitimate interest, so you still need to do legitimate interest assessment. But the key here is, once this goes live, is not sort of day one. That's it. We can now use soft opt-in. Let's go through our entire database and let's spam everybody. That would not be, very wise.
Yeah.
So I would say, do a cut, whatever happened in the past, leave it in the past, start from, day one, everybody from now on, you can then put them through, under the soft opt-in, because otherwise it's going to be too difficult to manage. Do you see what I mean? And you could get yourself into troubles.
Yeah. So there's something interesting here. I was the data protection officer for the Labour Party at the time when that was coming in, and before the Data Use and Access Act, we had the proposal for the soft opt-in option for charities and political parties. And that was in the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, DPDI, which was, the last proposal by the Tory government. And so it was split for the Data Use and Access Act. So the soft opt-in is not allowed for political parties now, whereas it is allowed for charities, which is really interesting. I mean, it would have made my life a lot easier as a DP of a political party had it stayed in at the time it passed. But yeah, I think it's probably the right choice.
Yeah, but you see, the other thing that it's the DUAA brings in that it's really interesting, and it kind of linked to the soft opt-in, because if you don't do it right, there are fines under PECR, which up until now they were up to 500k. And the ICO, it seems to be quite keen in issuing fines under the PECR regime. But now those fines have gone up to match the GDPR. That's what the DUAA brings in. So it becomes even more paramount to get your digital marketing right, because now the fines are higher. And given that the ICO is, quite keen on PECR fines, you could be under the hammer, so to speak. So yes, if you're charities, please be careful.
Yeah. I absolutely. I mean, it would be sad to think that a charity falls foul of the increased fines because of the soft opt-in model and trying to navigate that. Probably need to talk to somebody like yourself.
Yeah.
To navigate the minefield, really, because it is. I mean, a change like this, it might seem small, but it's always tough.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, charities, this applies to any business, but I think charities are much more vulnerable to it. It's reputational damage.
Yeah.
Because you are relying so much on donations, do you know what I mean? And so, volunteers. And so your reputation is everything when you're a charity. Because, again, charity by nature is trying, their ethos, their aim is to help individuals or animals or, whatever, but it's trying to do something good. So if you're then breaking the law, therefore you're doing something bad, it's the damage, it's doubled, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's not just financial. It's actually, there's a human cost to it as well.
Yes. So so and then the one that it is also, the DUAA introduces, it's the complaint process.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that one is. I'm really glad about that. I think there's a bit of a balance as to why that became a thing. I think a lot of it is because the ICO have a huge amount of complaints each year. I think 2023 it was about 44,000 complaints that they had looked into and answer in some way, and then ended up with a bit of a backlog. And I don't think that's going down. If anything, it's going up. So what they're trying to do is then say enforce organisations to have a complaints process with an outcome procedure of some form. So the ICO can be confident that they have gone through an internal complaints process in an organisation before it gets the ICO. If you're unhappy with the process, then you go to the ICO, because then you can have people saying, well, they don't have a complaints process. Like, okay, now you're breaking the law.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy fine, easy, slap on the wrist, whatever it needs to be, because they don't even have a process. So I think a lot of organisations will have some sort of process, and hopefully it will get others to go, oh, we actually have to do this if somebody's beginning to raise complaints. And it may be some of the rhetoric from the ICO when there's a complaint that comes in that says, we don't have a complaints process. The ICO can just ask directly, do you have one? Send me a complaints policy and procedure, and then we'll take it from there. So I hope that's a nudge for all companies to take a stronger stance in rectifying problems that people are genuinely experiencing.
Yes.
Yes,
and I agree. This process will, obviously it gives the ICO the advantage to see through, the small complaints that could have been resolved. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes people escalate, just for the sake of escalation, just because, do you know what I mean? They can't be bothered to tell the company, actually you've made a mistake. So I think it also drives a certain behavior, and I think it's fair to give an organisation the opportunity to rectify a wrongdoing.
I do. Yeah,
because sometimes they might not be aware that they've done something wrong. Do you know what I mean? It could be that an individual, say a customer service, has not done something right, from a data protection perspective, obviously, but because they've not been trained, or because they need additional training. So it could be something as simple as that, and that should not go to the ICO. So I think companies should be given the opportunity to rectify. Now, if the company doesn't want to rectify or can't rectify, then yes, then at that point you then have the legitimate right to go and escalate to the ICO and office, So I think
I completely agree, and I think it also combats an ICO policy that I heard them talk about on one of their conference days, and that their policy would be, if they received a complaint from a data subject, they would believe the data subject no matter what, and uphold the complaint of the data subject without reaching out to the company to ask if it's true or not, or right or not. And so you have a lot of organizations either worried, or you annoy their data protection people because the ICO just said, the data subject said this. How dare you do this? Not in that language, but in careful language. But it's basically, how dare you do this? And at times it really is people just trying to be difficult and trying to cause a problem and get your company on the ICO's radar somehow, and you just end up annoying the company. So you have a lot of companies very annoyed with the ICO because the ICO are taking the stance of the individual without even asking the organisation for a right to reply. What this change does is, no, you need the organisation to have a right to reply first, and then give that to us if you think it's wrong, and then we can judge it.
Yeah.
And I think, you know what, that probably makes sense.
Yeah, because there is always two sides to every story. And so,
Yes.
in order for the ICO to make the right judgment, they have to have the evidence from both parties. And so, what this process does, apart from giving the opportunity to the company to resolve it, but also, if the company, has a robust process and documents everything, keeps, the decisions, communication, and so on, there is their accountability as well as their defense.
Yeah, absolutely is. Absolutely is. I think it's a good move, this one. Yeah.
I think
I like
so.
that.
And if you think
Yeah.
about it, in anything, you would go and complain to the organization first, and then you go to the, the regulator, the ombudsman of whatever industry it is, isn't it? As the second step, because otherwise there is no escalation process.
So many people do it as a first step. So many. It's like I've complained to the ICO, and they use it as a stick to beat you with. And generally, it falls apart quite quickly. So you've sort of resolved that. Yeah.
Especially now that we're no longer part of the EU, and therefore we don't have the EDPB to go to the next level. It makes much more sense to have that, the first step and then the ICO. So the ICO is the ultimate step. So I think it makes sense. And what are your thoughts on the new lawful basis, the recognised legitimate interest?
Remind me of which ones are getting recognised legitimate interest. I can't call them off the top of my head right now.
So the recognised legitimate interest is the new lawful basis. So instead of having 6, we're going to have 7 under Article 6. And basically, what it is that for certain activities, or processing rather, it is recognised that it's a legitimate lawful basis. But interestingly enough, it's not for marketing. Because a lot of people think, marketing is a recognised legitimate interest. It isn't. So what this is about, it's when you're sharing data with lawful
law enforcement, isn't it?
Law enforcement. So it's so that it makes it easier for organization to share, information with the police, with, the local council. Do you know what I mean? Say, for example, in an investigation of a crime, etc. The other day for one of my charities, we had a request from the police, and if the recognised legitimate interest was in force now, that would make life so much easier.
Absolutely. I think it's quite pragmatic in the way it's been approached, but generally it doesn't change much for other less specific organizations. There isn't really much of a change. So it's not really a get out of jail free because I get recognized legitimate interest. It's more still around we've just kind of tightened the nuance around, it's more difficult to share police record data and criminal data and that kind of thing. So I think there's a couple more in there, but I'm not all over it because it hasn't really touched the things that I work on. So I think with a lot of data protection professionals, sometimes it's if something comes up and if you understand the whole regime around it, if it's a recognized legitimate interest, you don't need to do a legitimate interest assessment. And so it's a bit of it's almost a public task pass, if you like, a public interest similar to that. So really interesting development there, but I think they've been fairly pragmatic, but still not that many changes that people need to do.
Now, compared to the previous, to the predecessor, the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, that was proposing much more radical changes, in my opinion, rather than the DUAA. The DUAA obviously, yes, some changes, but not as radical and not as many. There are a couple of changes, but they are, they're not.
The ICO is having an update. The ICO is changing to the Information Commission.
That's
and they're changing their whole structure.
In terms of a business, that will not have an impact, do you know what I mean, on them,
Correct.
with the same with, with the recognized legitimate interest will not impact their day-to-day activities in terms of, that lawful basis will not apply to their operation, to their sales, to their marketing activity. So it's almost like it's just, for the occasion where you might have to share data with, law enforcement, which, some companies never have to. So it will not apply to the domain. They will never come across it. But I think it's important for organizations to be aware of these changes, because obviously you need, in certain circumstances, you will need to adapt and adopt new processes, like the complaint one, for example. And so, if you are not already on top of your GDPR, well, the question would be why not? But if you're not, then maybe now is the right time to do it, because, as I said, changes are coming.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's almost upsetting if an organization isn't kind of in control of what data they have and what the risk around that data could be, which is basically what the GDPR is all about, and that whole thing. Are you doing things ethically? Are you doing it in a way that people are expecting you to do it and use your data? And is there any risks around you using it in the way you're going to use it? Is it going to is it an open access model to the data for whatever reason? And are you doing that right? So, it just enhances and enforces a bit more around that. I just think it's silly if you're just gathering data and using it in any old which way, and you're just making people more vulnerable to attack and profiling and all the things you don't want to happen, because you as a big or small organization is just not quite doing it right. Yeah. And so having another augmentation law on top of it, hopefully, is kind of pushing it home that things are getting more, there's more focus on getting it right, I think.
Yeah. So, so if you want to know how to make these changes and properly, go to James for research.
Yeah.
And come to me for everything else.
Yeah, totally. I mean, my passion is like big data sharing projects for public good and public service, really. So those kinds of projects, find me on LinkedIn. I love that kind of stuff, research and big data sharing initiatives.
Yeah, fantastic. And if you want to get in touch with me, and you can find me on various social media, LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook, just search for CVG Solutions and you'll find me. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for joining me today, James. A pleasure as always.
Thanks, Cristina.